Hello everyone, welcome to devlog number 3. Last time I showed off our core 2.5D system and how it ties into level design and movement. This time we're focusing a little bit more on the boring stuff, aka the background systems that tie everything together and enable everything else to be built on top of it down the line. So the hyper important stuff, but less flashy stuff. For starters, as you can see in the background, we now have a main menu, or more so the basis of one. More importantly, the game boots to a menu, it can close and load into levels as needed, and it's all handled neatly inside the UI widget itself, meaning there's no extra layers to it. And once you select an option, it simply closes itself down and transitions into gameplay, though there will be a loading screen in the final build, of course. Additionally, in regards to background systems, we now have things like an enemy manager that tracks all the enemies in a level, checking if they're dead or in combat or whatever. It then watches for other events, such as the player resting to respawn these units as it needs to, or simply clean up leftover bodies, thus removing extra code from the enemies themselves and making it a lot more modular. To go along with this system and the general game feel, I've overhauled how a lot of the movement systems work. Originally, I was testing a bunch of things, including changing velocity or just using timelines for things like dashing, sliding, climbing, which works, but it leads to a lot of inconsistent reactions and behaviors. So, instead, I've transitioned most of them to work with root motion. If you don't know, root motion is when you let the skeleton's root bone drive the character's position rather than the code itself. Typically, you need an animation that has that data baked into it to do this, but I found an interesting solution from another channel called Cobra Code. Huge shout out to him for this next part. He figured out how to isolate and break out the root motion component code from the gameplay ability system and recompile it into a plugin and a single node. It does require a little bit of C++ to do, but the result is really incredible. I'll leave a link to his video below if you want to check that out. But basically what you're left with is a blueprint node that allows you to add root motion to your actors at will, and then use curve data to control how that motion is applied. Additionally, with the way it works under the hood, this can blend with other animations or even other inputs as well, which is usually a challenge with root motion animations. What this creates is a much snappier and consistent movement for things like dashing, sliding, wall climbing, etc. I still need to tune it a bit, but it's already 10 times more responsive and consistent than it was in the previous version. It's also just less overall code. I've also been working on some other foreground systems, like we have this healing plant that responds to the same damage system that the enemies and players do, but it instead spawns these orbs that gently drift down or track the player dynamically if the player actually needs to be healed. Then they obviously heal the player. I've also been tuning combat as well, including enemy hitboxes and such. There's even now a parry window that uses a similar root motion system to the one we previously discussed. There's also this little recovery marker that follows the player around. In the final build, this will obviously be invisible, but this thing follows along behind the player to act as a kind of waypoint in case you fall into a bottomless hole or hit some spikes you really shouldn't have, and then quickly reset you to its location, much like how other games have a quick checkpoint system that can help reset the player in dangerous situations. It even then waits for you when you jump and can even be told to stay behind in certain volumes just to avoid resetting you in some bad, soft, locky locations. On the art side of things, last time I said I was aiming to have a few assets to show off, and while unfortunately I don't have any finalized assets yet, I do have some cool art tests that are coming along really nicely. Things like water for certain levels, 3D objects fading dynamically to not completely block the camera, and this really cool material system I'm testing. You'll have to imagine it being a lot more subtle than it is here, and more so gently moving brushstrokey textures around a bit, but it's looking really cool and I like how it reacts to movement and animation. Making art can obviously be difficult, and finding a style that works aesthetically and technically is a complex task, but I have an idea of where I want it to go, and these tests are already showing a lot of promise. I'm also in contact with an artist who's been helping a ton with concept work, but that's all still a very work in progress, but I should have something to show off on that front really soon. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you for the reception to the other videos. If you want to see more and stay up to date, please do subscribe or join the Discord linked below. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.